Manish Prabhu and Mamta Mataji for hosting this evening's program. There was a last-minute change between Ramakrishna Prabhu's home and Tripati home, so we're very grateful for hosting this evening's program. Big thank you to His Grace Dravida Prabhu for coming and joining us and giving us a nice class. Our topic for this evening is simple living, high thinking. So it applies to almost all of us.
Why almost?
All of us. In case somebody has those egos, then maybe. But it applies to everyone. And Dravida Prabhu is a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He's been practicing Bhakti Yoga for over 40 years. And he is based in San Diego. Originally is from New York. He joined ISKCON around 1973. And he, as I said, is based in San Diego. He's a scholar, poet, and a musician. He's a poet, really an incredible poet. I really love his poetry. So hopefully at the end of the discourse, he might, you might get a taste of a couple of his poems. And Prabhu explains philosophy very easily and very nicely, very digestible. So I hope you all enjoy. So I won't take much of your time. I'll just give the floor to
I'm just hoping the children can be quiet. I think it's hard for them to concentrate on this high philosophy. It's hard enough for us, what to speak of the children. So they're going to need to be like absorbed in something, or they have their own room where they can. Anyway, we'll try to press on. Okay. So on this 16th day of November 2019 in Phoenix, Arizona. I assume we're still in Phoenix. We drove for a couple of hours, it seemed. We're going to be speaking about Prabhupada's principle of simple living and high thinking. And I thought I'd focus on a verse that is Srila Prabhupada would sometimes quote in the second chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this has this idea of simple living, high thinking. Although he doesn't use those words, the principle is there, and we'll expand on it. So, since we're going to be speaking on Bhagavatam, we should Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse number 10. Some of you may know this verse. Kamasya nendriya priti. Kamasya nendriya priti. Labho jiveta yavata. Labho jiveta yavata. Jivasya tattva jigyasa. Jivasya tattva jigyasa. Nato yasche karma bihi. Nato yasche karma bihi. So this is Suta Goswami speaking to the sages gathered at Naimisharanya. And he's answering their question, what is that dharma? What is that practice by which the soul can be fully satisfied? And he began a few verses previous. I'll read the translations up to this one after I read this translation. And this verse speaks about living very simply and inquiring in the absolute truth, which is what the high thinking is all about. So the translation here is, life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since the human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. And I'm just going to read, starting text 6, which is a couple of verses hence, where he begins answering this question, what is that supreme dharma, which should concern all of us, by which the soul can be fully satisfied. The supreme occupation or dharma for all humanity is that by which one can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord, Krishna. Such devotional service must be unmotivated not materially motivated at all, and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. By rendering devotional service to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Now the word there is vairagya, which is really what simple living is all about. So the combination of these two words, vairagya and vidya, really are very closely aligned with simple living, living as simply as possible, and high thinking, cultivating transcendental knowledge, vairagya vidya. So just by practicing bhakti, this vairagya and knowledge, or vidya, automatically develop. The occupational activities one performs according to one's own position are only so much useless labor if they don't provoke attraction to the message of the personality of Godhead. So this is a very radical statement, is that Dharma really is Dharma if it increases our attraction for spiritual life, for knowing God and for achieving the ultimate goal of life. Otherwise, it's material. Then the verse before the one we read, all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. So before we read the purport to the verse we read, because now we're up to it, many of you are familiar with these 4 goals of human life in the Vedic culture: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Religion, religiosity, which leads to prosperity, Artha, by which one can fulfill one's material desires, and ultimately achieve mukti, or liberation. So here, he's dealing with these, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. But he's saying that actually, real Dharma is not meant for Artha. And Artha, if you get it, is not meant for Kama. That's the verse we read. That Dharma is really meant for moksha, for liberation. And the ultimate liberation is going back home, back to Godhead, through the process of reawakening our original loving devotion to Krishna. So the real purpose of Dharma is bhakti. That was the first verse. Now I'll read Prabhupada's purport. The completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed toward the fulfillment of material desires and sense gratification. In such a civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, in social service, in altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately even in religion, or even in salvation, the very same tint of sense gratification is ever presently predominant. In the political field, the leaders of men fight with one another to fulfill their personal sense gratification. This could be taken from the headlines of the...
Today.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's in the 70s,
yeah.
but it's right now.
Right. We'll have time for this. Prabhupada's books are like as pertinent today. These books are over 50. He wrote this over 50 years ago, in 1960.
Really?
Yes, and this is permanent today.
Ah.
The voters adore the voters adore the so-called leaders only when they promise sense gratification. As soon as the voters are dissatisfied in their own sense gratification, they dethrone the leaders. The leaders must always disappoint the voters by not satisfying their senses. The same is applicable in all other fields. No one is serious about the problems of life, the real problems of life, which we'll discuss. Even those who are on the path of so-called salvation desire to become one with the Absolute Truth, and thus to commit spiritual suicide for sense gratification. But the Srimad Bhagavatam says one should not live for sense gratification. One should satisfy the senses only in so much as required for self-preservation, not for sense gratification. In other words, live simply, simple living, keep the body and soul together, and take care of business, but don't exaggerate it. Don't waste your time. That's not your ultimate goal in life. That's the point here. Very important point. Because the body is made of senses, which also require a certain amount of satisfaction, there are regulative directions for satisfaction of such senses. But the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment. For example, marriage or the combination of man and woman is necessary for progeny, but is not meant for sense enjoyment. In the absence of voluntary restraint, there is propaganda for family planning, but foolish men do not know that family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is a search after the Absolute Truth. Seekers of the Absolute Truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the Absolute Truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. In every sphere of life, therefore, the ultimate end must be seeking after the Absolute Truth, And that sort of engagement will make one happy, because one will be less engaged in varieties of sense gratification. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnanandana-salakaya Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance to him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So this phrase here in this verse, Jivasya Tattva Jigyasa, one should live, the main goal of one's life as a human being is to search after the truth, the tattva, the absolute truth. This is an echo of the Vedanta Sutra. It is said, and it's explicitly in the Bhagavatam, and Lord Chaitanya taught, that the Bhagavad Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the final literary work of Vyasadeva, after he'd written all the other Puranas, he'd written the Mahabharata, which includes the Bhagavad Gita, he had written the Vedanta Sutra, all the Upanishads, the Vedas, but he was dissatisfied. I'm missing something. It's a lot of writing. And but he said, there's something I missed. And Narada Muni came down, his spiritual master, because he's always in tune with the disciples and he understands their trouble. And he instructed them that now you should write a book, which is the Bhagavad Purana, that's wholly and solely deals with the absolute truth, personality of Godhead, devotional service, and devotees, and the Lord's expansions and incarnations. In other words, the Bhagavad Purana. The other books contain some of that. Certainly we have in the Mahabharata, we have the Bhagavad Gita. No one can deny that this is a very essential truth. And in the other Puranas, some of the other Puranas, such as Padma Purana, there are whole sections dealing with Krishna and Mathura and devotional service. But there's other things mixed in. It's not wholly and solely dealing with it. So this search, what is the first sutra or aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra? This we should know. Atato brahma jigyasa. Now, therefore, having attained the rare and valuable human form of life, one should inquire into Brahman. Then you say, what is that Brahman? Second sutra. Janman yasya yataha. Simple, so these aphorisms, they require explanation, right? So what is, Janma means creation, birth. Adi means sustenance and final annihilation. Yataha, from whom or from which has everything emanated? What is sustaining everything, and into what will everything be dissolved in the end? Now, how can we find this out? We can't find it out by investigating with our material senses and mind. They're too covered, they're too limited. Everyone knows the senses are limited, the mind is limited. So how can we know? Third sutra, Shastra Yonitvat, by consulting the Shastra, revealed scripture, which is ultimately spoken by Krishna. But Vyasadeva was an expansion of Krishna. He's known as Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas, right? So it's Krishna's words, inspired in the heart of Brahma, taught to Vyasadeva, written down into the Shastra, and taught by realized souls that will actually reveal to us what is that Brahman, what is that source of everything. And what's the answer? We know, because we've been taught by Srila Prabhupada. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadi Adi, Sarva Karana Karana. The Lord Brahma, who's our spiritual master, ultimate head of our sampradaya, inspired by Krishna himself, as explained in the very first verse of the Bhagavatam. Yene Brahma Raya Adi Kaviye. He's the Adi Kaviye, the original wise person of Brahma. And he was inspired in the heart. The Vedas were impressed in the heart. And he wrote down, after meditating and realizing, the Brahma Samhita. And what's the first verse? Very important for us. Ishvara Parama Krishna, that supreme Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karana. There's the answer. He is the source of the cause of all causes is Krishna. And he's the supreme controller. He has a form. He's not a formless entity. Satchidananda Vigraha. He has a form with senses and activities and everything we have. He's the supreme person. And Adi Govinda, he has no beginning, but he's the beginning of everything. And Govinda, he has his pastimes in the ultimate spiritual world with the cows, the cowherd boys, cowherd girls, and everything else. And he's the cause of all causes. So this is what, of course, the Bhagavatam aims at that same truth. So now, back to our theme, simple living, high thinking. So, this phrase, Labho Jiveti Avata, means one should get what one needs to live comfortably, keep body and soul together, for the purpose of inquiring into the absolute truth. These bodies of ours are just like machines. They're just like a car. Yantra Rudani Maya, he says, right? That in the 18th chapter. The living entity is wandering throughout the different universes, the different species, you know, mounted on a machine made of the material energy. Yantra. Yantra means machine. It's a very, very complicated, amazing machine. Each one of us has one, right? We're all human beings here. And it has a very specific purpose. But like all bodies in this world, all organisms, we have our attraction to the material energy, to a certain sense gratification. But human beings have the unique intelligence to inquire into these ultimate matters. In order to achieve the goal of life, and the goal of life is not just to enjoy various sense gratifications, you know, and then get older, and then have so many difficulties come, you know, old age, disease, death, the threefold miseries. I live in California. When I moved there, when I was in Florida, this is in the 80s, I was working on this Bhagavatam, completing it, 10th, 11th, and 12th cantos. I worked with Gopi Puranadana Prabhu, a great Sanskrit scholar and a dear friend who passed about 8 years ago, and Ridhyananda Das Goswami. And we had, you know, I had the greatest blessing to work on the 10th canto, 11th canto, and 12th canto in order to complete Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. So at that time, we were living in, you know, Miami. I had come from Philadelphia and New York, where it was, you know, cold in the winter and polluted. Here I am living on the beach. Literally, I could see the Atlantic Ocean out of my window. We had a hotel there for a while. It was you know, it was a temple, and we got it. Again, we had to sell it. But there I was sitting there. I didn't spend my time looking out the window. You know, I'm working on the books, but I was sitting in that situation. But there's the threat of hurricanes. When the hurricane season comes, you watch those weather maps, and if one is coming at you, you have to batten up the windows and get out. Very powerful winds. They may become more powerful in the last few years. And so then I drove all across the country in '89, and I came to San Diego. I've been there ever since, 30 years now. Now I don't have to worry about hurricanes. Even though they come up, you see, but they always go west. In the northern hemisphere, they go toward the west. So they never hit San Diego. They go out, sometimes they hit Hawaii a few years ago. But anyway, but what do we have to worry about? Earthquakes, you know? Where am I? You know, I looked at the map. Where is that San Andreas Fault, you know? San Diego, it goes a little bit to the east, you know. It's still, there's a danger. And unlike hurricanes, there's no warning. You know, it's like, boom, it's like, boom. I've been through a few of those. Suddenly the earth is moving. Anyway, luckily no catastrophic. But the point is, this is what material life is there's always the passage of time. I was sharing this verse with some devotees. I don't know if it was here or back in Tucson. I came from Tucson. I spent a few days. Uddhava, he is speaking to Krishna in the 11th canto. There's something called the Uddhava Gita, which is kind of expanding on the Bhagavad Gita. It's Krishna's last instruction. So Uddhava is praying to Krishna, and he gives his prayer. We can all embrace his prayer. You know, this is a wonderful prayer. It says, Tashtam janam sam patitam bilesmin kala hina chudda sukora tarsham samudharayanam kripaya pavarga vatruva rasim chamahanubhava. So as our great acharyas in our line, or great devotees like Buddha, they often take the role of conditioned souls, you know, so that we can know how to pray. So he said, my dear Lord, I'm bitten. I've fallen into this snake hole called the material world, and I'm being bitten by the snake of time. Kalahina. Think about it. Time is pushing us toward destruction. We're all being pushed toward old age, death, and then rebirth. So, therefore, he feels like he's being bitten. Dashtam janam sampatitam bilesmin. Kalahina. But even though time is threatening to take everything away, including our life, still, the chudra sukha urutarsham. I have a great thirst, a great desire for insignificant sense gratification. We're trying to enjoy whatever we can in the middle of this Holocaust. This is the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. in the song, you know. We realize our actual situation here. That we're on a very tottering platform, like that proverbial drop of water on a lotus leaf, you know, moving along. You know, the song is another song. I think that's Narottam Thakur, Lochanasta. So the first wisdom that we are meant to get from the Shastra, from the teachers, is that time is passing. We have a mission in human life. We should know what that mission is, and we should direct as much of our energy toward that. And that means living as simply as possible. Don't get distracted in all of the phantasmagoria of Maya's trick that she's trying to play us. Her job, thankless task, she's also a servant of Krishna, is to see if we're ready to, you know, still be distracted, or whether we're ready to get serious. And right here at the beginning of Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, Labho jivati yavata, your senses are not meant for unlimited sense gratification. They're meant for whatever, you know, sense gratification. You have to eat something, so there's a, you know, a way of making prasadam. You turn it into a service. You prepare nice vegetarian preparations with devotion, offer them with devotion. Then when you partake of them with devotion, that's an exchange of love with Krishna. It's purifying. You know, even if you eat vegetarian food just for your own sense gratification, that's entangling. Krishna says, if you live just for sense gratification, you live a sinful life and you live uselessly. Mogam, partasajivit. Strong words of the Shastra. But we need that. It will wake us up. So, narto yaschaya karmavi, nothing should be the goal of our life except what will increase our understanding and our devotion, our connection with the absolute truth, Krishna, which we know is Krishna. That's the message of this verse. And Prabhupada's phrase, which I think comes from some philosopher, the simple living, high thinking, but it's perfect for us. That was the reason why he started some farms, you know, where devotees could live peacefully, depending on Krishna, the land and the cows, and save time for kirtan and study and elevation. So that the simplest person, this is what's so great about the movement that he started, that if you simply read, you know, the few books that he gave us, relatively few compared to the vast number of Vedas that there are, and you try to lead your life according to that, follow the simple principles he gave. Yes, there are some austerities. We need that because we're habituated to being entangled in this material world and forgetting all about the mission of our human life, all about the fact that we're spirit, not matter, that this one life is just a short chapter in a very long book. And there's so many chapters we've written before, we've forgotten, but we're writing the next chapter right now. So everything we do has either a positive or a negative effect. If we just allow ourselves to be controlled by the modes of nature, by Krishna's energy, and allured by sense gratification, you can sit there, then we've wasted our human life. You know, this is the tragedy. That's okay. So, right here at the beginning, this 2nd chapter, Sutta Goswami is giving us a complete lesson. From verse 126 to 121. You have the complete program there of bhakti. Centered on hearing and chanting. It ends with these verses, and then my mentor over here, my host, is telling me we have to be a little bit short tonight because. So I'm trying to keep it short. But it's such an important information here. These verses, which were quoted in the Bhagavad Gita, centered on getting a taste for hearing about Krishna. The first way to do that is doing what actually you're doing. You're giving your time and your attention to these things. I'm simply trying to repeat the words of Srila Prabhupada. So we come up to the end of these verses, and what do we find? Shrinvadam Sakata Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtana Hridyandaksto Yabadhani Vidunoti Suditsakam. That when one sincerely hears the talks about Krishna, the holy name, we actually let that sound vibration come into our ears and we focus on it and we have some faith. Then that Krishna within the heart, don't forget Krishna is within all of our hearts as the super soul. You know. He sees that and he wipes away the abhadras, the inauspicious things in our heart that are keeping us from understanding who we are and keeping our relationship with Krishna a mystery or even non-existent, completely forgotten. So he's reminding us, he's helping us. He's very happy to hear that, oh, this living entity of all of the countless trillions and trillions is hearing my glories, is hearing my name. Let me purify. And as that purification, in the next verse says, Nasta Prayasha Bandreshu, when the impurities are, Prabhupada says, maybe 75%, not fully gone, but then you become fixed in the mode of goodness. And you're no longer under the control of the lower self, controlled by the lower mode, passion and ignorance, such as lust and greed and anger and all these things, that everybody is being controlled. You can see that in the daily hearings that they have. So, then what happens is that Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga, by this practice of bhakti, one's natural, joyful state comes up. Haven't we all experienced when there's a really ecstatic kirtan or a festival and we're absorbed in service, we're absorbed in seeing Krishna, and looking at the beautiful deity, somehow or other, there's a certain happiness that comes there? If we weren't experiencing that happiness, we wouldn't come back to the temple. The temple is, there's something there, right? And that something is coming up from within our heart. Yes, it has an external aspect where the holy name is there. Certainly Krishna is there. But we're responding to it more than usual, because we're more attuned. So that purification is taking place, and at this stage, Prasanna Manaso, when you Bhagavad Takta Vijnana, the word Vijnana means realized knowledge, then you feel that joyfulness all the time. That's Brahma-bhuta. Brahma-bhuta, Prasannatma. Prasannatma means naturally joyful and also very clear-minded. Prasannatma. So then what happens? Vidyadevidya Grantis, all your knots in the heart and your attachments in this world that are keeping you bound to come back birth after birth and suffering, they're all tied, cut off. Vidyadevidya Granti. These knots in the heart are spoken again and again in the Bhagavatam. The doubts are all gone because you're directly experiencing Krishna within and without in your relationship. How can you doubt? You may doubt that there's such a thing. You grew up in a desert island somewhere. So what do you mean? There's this little device where I could see 1,000 miles away and speak to people. That can't be true. But then if someone comes and shows you a cell phone, your doubts are finished. In other words, you have direct experience. So that's what this is about. And then the last verse in the series, Vidyadavade Chidnyante Saratan Chiyante Chasya Karmani, and all your karmas eradicated when you see the Lord and you see yourself. One sees oneself and one's master in the heart. So that's realization. So right there in the second chapter. But it begins with us accepting this teaching, that the mission of our life is to understand this absolute truth, Brahman, which is ultimately Krishna, the Supreme Brahman, Param Brahma Param, and to revive our relationship with Krishna. And then, if that faith, even preliminary faith is there, we can accept the instructions from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Bhagavatam, from the Nectar of Devotion, all the books Prabhupada gave us, and begin the process of regular chanting and hearing, and doing those things that we know will further our devotion, and giving up those things which we may be habituated to, that we know are not supposed to be there. This is what it's going to take. And simple living, high thinking is kind of a metaphor for that kind of lifestyle. That's the lifestyle we should try to be. Minimize our involvement in the things that take our mind away from Krishna. Maximize our involvement gradually over time with hearing and chanting and serving and all the wonderful aspects of Krishna consciousness that will bring us purity and bring us to the state of eternal happiness. And when we leave this body, back to Godhead. This should be our goal in life. And sure, we may not make it in one lifetime, but there's no loss. There's no loss of diminution. Chakpasvadharmam chadanatma janghere. Narada Muni's instructions to Vyasadeva, he says if someone gives up their external activities and just practices bhakti, but they fall away from the path, he says, where is there anything inauspicious? Whatever you achieve in this lifetime is good for the next lifetime. You'll be born in a family of devotees or yogis and continue. But if someone very nicely follows the material path and does all his duties, but there's no Krishna consciousness, where is there any gain? Because all of it's taken away at death and you don't know where they're going. You see what I'm saying? So we should invest, because this is, we want to invest our time and energy where it'll be most